Hola amigos, coming up in this episode.
Se dice hay fantasmas aquí, ¿es verdad?
Sí.
And here it is, a huge statue of a left hand just emerging from the middle of nowhere in the middle of the desert.
Well, my first night camping since I was a kid.
So I'm in the far north of Chile in the Atacama Desert, heading southwest from Calama, but I take a small diversion to the north to visit a place called Chacabuco. Chacabuco is a former oficina, a saltpetre processing plant, and according to that sign, they also produced iodine. You hear that piped music? More about that in a minute. Immediately, the caretaker and his dog appeared to guide me around the massive site. So this is Señor Walter Robertson. He spoke in a matter-of-fact manner, a man who got straight to the point. And no doubt this comes from answering the same old questions over and over again to visiting tourists.
¿Vives solo acá?
Sí.
¿Por cuánto tiempo vives acá?
Estoy 7 por 7. 7 días acá y 7 días en Antofagasta.
¿Y qué fue este lugar?
Fue una salitrera y después fue un centro de presos políticos. Para el tiempo de Pinochet.
¿Y fue niños y familias y todo en el tiempo de Salitre?
En el tiempo de Salitre trabajaban hasta los niños chicos acá. Habían 7.000 personas acá, en esta salitrera.
¿Y durante el tiempo de presión, mismo número de prisioneros o no?
1.800 presos vieron acá.
Sí. ¿No hay fantasmas aquí?
Sí.
¿Hay?
Sí.
¿A vista?
Sí.
¿Qué tipo de fantasma?
He visto del tiempo de Salitre.
¿Sí?
He visto una pareja de viejitos.
¿Tú lo viste o otra persona?
Yo lo vi.
¿Qué fue?
Un matrimonio de ancianos.
¿Sí?
Del tiempo del Salitre que salen de la pulpería, se sientan en la plaza, dan la vuelta a la plaza y de ahí se pierden para allá.
¿Hace cuándo fue eso?
Ya yo lo veo casi cada 3 días, cada 8 días.
¿Os sentí asustado o vive aquí solo?
No, la primera vez me asusté, pero ya después no...
No hay problema.
No, porque son espíritus buenos, no son cosas que uno al principio cuando llega acá se asusta, pero después ya se acostumbra ya a las bullas. Por ser acá en la maternidad, se escucha llorar guagua, se escucha gente que está llorando.
¿Y su perrito?
Este perrito tiene 7 meses. Se llama Chacabuco.
Chaca.
Muy buen guardián.
So after that startling introduction, Señor Robertson took me for a walking tour. The fact that he has an English name hints to the past, to the British and American interests who made huge investments here in the late 1800s and early 1900s. First of all, he showed me a tree trunk carved with a religious theme by a political prisoner called caliche. Caliche is also the name of the raw material from which they extract the saltpetre, but it was also this Chilean artist's nickname.
Apodado el caliche.
It does look like a person, either lifting their arms up in despair or hanging by their arms. You can see his nickname, Caliche, and his real name carved in there.
74.
¿Ves? 74. Osvaldo Valdés.
We walked around a bit more. Now that looks a lot like a watchtower on the right there. If ever there was a ghost town, this place is it. Now this street, to me, it did have an uncanny resemblance to a Nazi concentration camp. So something written here in charcoal. This church was made by something. Now, this bas-relief representation of a church was done by the same artist who did the tree, Caliche, but it was carved directly out of the adobe wall. I think, reading between the lines of this poem, you can see they're trying to be non-political because they had to be very careful what they wrote and what they said, even for many years after their internment. The church itself, which serviced the saltpetre community and also the concentration camp community, no longer exists. It burnt down in the 80s, I think.
Este es un poema que dejó un preso político, que viene de Canadá.
That looks like a prison cell window. Now that passing truck shows just how close we are to the Pan-American Highway. In some places it looks like the town has been destroyed by an earthquake. This sign says the local grocery shop, called Pulperia in Spanish, operated as a monopoly, but it was better than some other towns because it accepted cash and other towns often only accepted vouchers or coupons which were at highly inflated prices.
He visto un militar que se suicidó arriba del teatro.
¿Sí?
Mandaron a matar al hermano. El hermano estaba como preso político acá. Y lo mandaron a matarlo. Y él subió para el teatro y se pegó un tiro. Se suicidó.
En el tiempo de
la dictadura, del 76 al 74.
The Valich report, compiled by a bishop in the early 2000s, listed a reign of terror during the dictatorship of Pinochet. They detained and tortured anyone deemed a troublemaker. The most common detainees were left-wing activists, artists, intellectuals and union leaders. Many were tortured and several thousand were executed or disappeared. The types of torture included sexual assault or mental torture, such as witnessing torture of others, playing Russian roulette, or witnessing the execution of other detainees. So it does seem feasible to me that a soldier who had already witnessed atrocities and knew that they were going to happen would rather shoot himself than shoot his own brother. That's the town theatre, which underwent a restoration and repainting in the 90s, funded by a German charity. Inside here you can easily imagine the earlier 20th century with some great live entertainment. Chacabuco as a town only existed for 14 years before it was abandoned. Now there is a sign here saying that the great Enrique Caruso performed here, but it's pretty unlikely when you check the dates that he died a few years before this place was even built. Señor Robertson showed me a small museum, and there were relics from both the saltpetre era and the concentration camp era. It's ironic that one of the movies in the earlier era was titled Nancy Steele is Missing, given this town's later role as a concentration camp where many people did disappear. Another reminder that the British were prominent in this area. In fact, while most of the workers were Chilean or Bolivian, a 1907 census records that a sizable number of British people worked in the saltpetre industry. Another connection with the English who ran this plant. It says salsa inglés, Worcestershire sauce. You hear that piped music. In the time of the concentration camp, the political prisoners would have heard that as well, because it was used as a form of mental torture. This message commemorates someone's father. As many of the detainees were intellectuals, there was no lack of teaching staff, so they formed their own university, but the teaching of Chilean history was strictly forbidden. Here's a reminder that the camp was surrounded by a high electric fence. And this says the saltpetre workers suffered a lot of lung diseases and also venereal disease caught from prostitutes. It also says the workers in those days believed in love potions sold to them by shamans from the highlands. In an effort to minimise diseases caused by poor hygiene, newcomers were disinfected in a dedicated house of cleanliness. So this town has had several lives, the first 3 of which were short-lived. 14 years as a saltpetre company town, 2 years as a national monument, and 18 months as a concentration camp.
¿Qué haces aquí? ¿Dónde?
Acá fue donde se suicidó el militar.
¿Y ha visto el fantasma acá?
Acá, y se para acá y mira para todo para allá.
That wooden box reminds me of a coffin, but it actually housed the town clock. Then Señor Robertson left me and I just contemplated this view. Señor Robertson said his main problem was stopping thieves who come and scavenge building material, especially Oregon pine, a valuable material in this treeless wasteland. Being in the high tropical desert, there was a huge diurnal temperature range, freezing in the night and boiling in the daytime. And you can bet your bottom dollar in the Pinochet era there would have been precious little to keep them warm or cool. So you could imagine this town was quite prosperous in the days of the salitrera when there were families and women here, but when it was an internment camp, there was only men here. Back in the theatre stall I could hear strange noises. Probably just the wind. Probably.
¿Y gusta su empleo aquí?
Sí,
¿Sí? ¿Por qué?
yo soy nacido y criado en La Pampa también.
¿Nació acá?
No, en Pedro Valdivia.
En Perú.
En Pedro de Valdivia, una
¿O
salitrera.
Pedro de Valdivia? Sí,
Una
sí.
salitrera.
Ah, sí. Y quiere prolongar historias.
Claro.
Sí.
Landmines placed during the concentration camp era are one legacy that will continue to haunt Chileans for years to come.
¿Y fue minado esta zona?
De ahí para allá estaba todo minado. Todo eso para allá estaba minado.
¿Todavía?
No, el año pasado vinieron a sacar, pero no sacaron todo, o sea, no se sacó todo lo que tenía que sacarse. Tuvieron como 4 días.
¿Algunos existen todavía?
Todavía quedan minados.
When I looked up Chacabuco on Wikipedia, it said there are 98 landmines still unaccounted for.
By some accounts, Chacabuco was one of the less notorious concentration camps, but just imagine being stuck out here. Look at the desolation of this place. And now I want to just jump forward a few years to the year 2013, when an ex-detainee came up with some reporters and dug up a time capsule, a letter he wrote to himself and buried 40 years previously, detailing some of the tormenting ordeals those poor men had to suffer.
El testimonio de una botella que enterraron aquí. Uno de los compañeros que fueron detenidos.
Aquí está el Rosario. A la caída del gobierno popular, encabezado por los compañeros.
La emoción del compañero es inmensa.
Uno que lee.
El fusilamiento de los perros, llegados al campo, las misteriosas explosiones de las minas que rodeaban el campo, los días sin agua, aun cuando permanecieron.
It's not often you meet somebody who speaks openly about seeing ghosts every day. So before I left, I asked Señor Robertson to elaborate a little bit more.
¿Has visto un matrimonio fantasma?
Claro, es un viejito y una viejita. Son como de 70, 80 años.
¿Sí? ¿Has visto con su propio ojo?
Sí, con su tongo, con su terno, con su...
Pero no,
como se vestían en la época del salitre.
pero no sentí asustado, vivía
No,
aquí
la
solo.
primera vez me asusté.
Sí.
Me asusté y después seguí viéndolo y pasaban a 2 metros mío
Sí.
y pasaban por al lado pero la carita así igual que viejito, o sea, no se le ve calavera, nada, o sea, se ve normal nomás, como que ellos están en el tiempo de salitrera.
So with that surrealistic music still piping and the dog Chacabuco eagerly seeing me off, I rode out of this place, feeling both fascinated and saddened by the history of the place that I just heard. So, a short while after leaving Chacabuco, I also left the tropics. Here I am munching on an apple on the Tropic of Capricorn. See the sticker in the bottom right-hand side there? Seems like I'm not the only one heading to Ushuaia. Just then a train passed by. I've been thinking about what's in those reddish containers. I think it could be sulfuric acid used in the leaching process to extract the copper ore. I'm just guessing, but that's what I think it would be. Next stop was the town of La Negra, where I filled up on gasoline and also bought some food because I'm planning on taking advantage of the dry desert climate and camping tonight. But before seeing a suitable campsite, I saw a sign that said Mano del Desierto, the hand of the desert. It looked about a mile or so just up a gravel road there, up the side there, straight off the Pan American. But wait a minute, there looks like there's 2 bikers up there. Maybe I should just go up and say hello. Hello, and this guy looks like he wants to have a chat.
¿De dónde vienes? Cusco. Uy, lo compro 9 en Cusco. Ya. ¿De dónde eres usted? De Antofagasta. Ah, no, cerca, ¿no? Cerca. Sí. 600. Ah. Teneré. Es una Super Teneré. 1200. O 1200. Ah. Esto es 250. Ah, ¿verdad? Hola. Hola. ¿Cómo estás? Oh, BMW. ¿De dónde viene? Cusco. ¿De Cusco? Sí, lo compro en Cusco nueva. Buena, una foto. Mucho viento. Bien cargado, ¿ah? No tan peso, pero 60 kilogramos. ¿Hasta dónde va? Voy por el sur, por Patagonia. ¿A la Patagonia? ¿Ushuaia? Sí. ¿Y ustedes? Solo por Antofagasta. ¿Antofagasta? Sí. Viene en auto. Ok. Nos vemos entonces.
And here it is, a huge statue of a left hand just emerging from the middle of nowhere in the middle of the desert. Apparently a Chilean artist made this, and there's 4 of them. There's 2 in South America, the other one is on a beach in Uruguay, and there's another couple of hands, one in Venice and one in Madrid in Europe. Oh man, these desert winds are bad in the afternoon. Hey, look at those tracks going up that hill there. That would be a great spot to get a photo of this monument, but I don't feel like going up there. There's a truck parked behind the hand. This sculpture represents human rights, the poor hand asking to be helped. Well, I almost rode past it, but I'm glad I saw it and came up and had a look because it's one more thing ticked off my bucket list. A few kilometres later, I stopped to take a pic of this road sign. 1,280 kilometres to Santiago, the capital, and then I'm halfway to Patagonia. That's only 3 or 4 good days' ride. That should be very doable. But look how dry this desert is. Still not a cactus, not a blade of grass. Absolute desert. And look at the temperature. 42 degrees Celsius is well over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's blisteringly hot. And that wind, although it cools you down, it sucks every bit of moisture and perspiration out of you, so you're eternally thirsty. It was now getting late in the afternoon and I decided I wanted to camp in one of the salitrera oficinas. And it was only a matter of time before I found one. Ruinas Britania, right beside the Pan-American Highway, but with enough high walls to be able to pitch my tent without being seen from the road. I selected a spot between these 2 walls, hoping that they would break the wind somewhat, but the wind was pretty strong. So I hunted around for a few rocks just to weigh down the corners of the tent. There are a lot of broken bricks around here. And this is how they made some of the walls.
You can see the different types of brickwork here.
And this was a surprise. Bricks manufactured in Coltness, Scotland. I read somewhere that bricks were often carried as ballast in the ship's hulls in the days of sailing ships. So I guess that's what we're seeing here. I wonder where this came from and what was in it.
This has been equipped the old-fashioned way.
Lots of broken glass and rusty nails. There's a risk of getting a puncture riding around here. I wonder what this was the lid off. More evidence of a bygone era. These walls are pretty unique. Bags of rubble laid out like pillows in courses like bricks. They look pretty solid. Looks like they might last another 100 years or maybe even another 500 years.
Let's try out this 2-man tent and see how big it is. Not really 2-man, not really 1-man. Well, this will be my first dinner, my first camping night since I was a kid. This is my dinner. I better save that for breakfast. Peanuts for calories, peaches, some tin tuna, a bit of water. I should be alright, as long as none of those ghosts that Walter was talking about come and see me tonight. I don't believe in ghosts. I should be alright.
A 5-star meal for me tonight. The sun was setting fast. As the sun set, the temperature dropped pretty quick. I don't know how cold it's going to get tonight, but this site is at just under 2,000 metres, or a bit over 6,500 feet. My first night under the stars. But no rest for me. I thought I could hear someone walking around outside, like crunching footsteps.
What was that?
Is this my imagination playing tricks on me? Eventually, though, I went back to sleep without leaving the tent to investigate.
Coming up in the next episode...
I just hope I don't get a puncture with all these rusty nails around here. This is one of the weirdest rock formations I've ever seen. That is a weird-looking lighthouse, if that's what it is. I wonder how much gold came out of here. A lot, evidently.